of MAPOC to introduce Chancellor Haddon. I have known her since 1990. I got entree to that little special group of people who were doing really wonderful things in and around Philadelphia. And I've always been the beneficiary of having known Phoebe, not only because of who she is, but her commitment to MAPOC is especially long-standing and sincere. You may not know much about her. She's been had been a long time serving faculty member at Temple. She went on to dean, very successfully, I might add, at Maryland. And now she's taking on an equally daunting task at Rutgers Camden, where I'm sure she's going to succeed. Before all of that, Phoebe went to Smith, Duquesne's, Yale. She's a well-respected and noted constitutional scholar and tort scholar. She practiced, all the right names, Wilma Cutler. She was, while at Maryland, really an important part of their franchise because she managed to go out and get, I have to look at the numbers, a $30 million endowment. Now, we all know that in the end, money counts. Beyond that, she has been noted as by the national jurists as one of the 25 most influential people in legal education. She served on a number of boards, including the Board of Governors and Executive Committee of SALT. She's served on the Executive Committee of the AALS. She's been a trustee of LSAC. And in one particular year, last year, a noted year for her, in addition to all the other notes for her, she was invited by the American Law Institute to serve at the annual meeting, along with other august members of the profession. And that includes Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts, and Associate Justices Stevens and Ginsburg. So she brings to us lots of not only service, she brings to us the kind of heart and mind that matters, at least to MAPOC, and I'm sure to others because of who she is. And it's just not who she is, it's how she delivers who she is to us. So we're all better for having Phoebe in our midst. And so without much delay, Chancellor Haddon.
Yes, no, yes? All right. Thank you, Reggie, for that wonderful introduction. I am so happy to be here, and I am always happy to be at MAPOC, but it really is a joy for me to come back into the law school community and talk about things that are near and dear to my heart. Even as I'm enjoying the first 6 months of being chancellor of a wonderful, wonderful campus, Rutgers Camden, which is probably very different than what you can imagine. How many people have been to Rutgers Camden? All right, okay, well, some of you know that it's actually a liberal arts kind of campus that's tucked away in a very, very, very disturbing city that's on its upswing. And so there's lots to be done in Camden, but there's also a very, very nurturing community of business school, law school, nursing school, College of Arts and Sciences, and lots of wonderful centers of justice that are connected with the campus and that do great work. But it's enabled me to look at some of the things that I struggled with as a law professor, as a member of SALT and MAPOC and other contexts, from the vantage point of a faculty member committed to access, and then moved to a dean and having to address those issues in a somewhat different context, where pressures like rankings and raising money and other kinds of things kind of often got in the way. And now I'm at a campus that is committed to access and that involves many, many non-traditional students, many of whom are transfer students, but many are committed to research and are nurtured by our research faculty in a different kind of way of thinking about those same problems. And today's conference and the panel that started out our discussion this morning really mesh very well with what I want to talk about, the right to learn. And I'm going to start with remarking that in 1949, W.E.B. Du Bois wrote that of all the civil rights for which the world has fought, for 5,000 years, we have been struggling to attain the right to learn, a right which he characterized as the most fundamental of all. And we all know that recently, the world embraced this notion of how fundamental that civil right would be and how remarkable it would be to have it when Malala, a courageous young girl, asked all of us to support her in her efforts to ensure that every child have the right and opportunity to learn, including young women, and was willing to stand up after being brutally attacked for going to school. The conditions are different, obviously, in the United States, but the cause is similar. In this country, I believe we are facing a profound crisis in public education. More than half of all public school students nationwide in 2013 were from families whose income qualified for free or reduced price lunches. And we are assigning those children who are the poorest and people of color to schools not equipped with what it takes to move them out of poverty and enable them to become productive citizens of their communities. And I believe we must reinvigorate our commitment to ensuring in our country that every child not only learns in a safe environment and has the access to effective schools from pre-K to high school, but if we're really going to break the arc of poverty, the cycle of poverty, each child should have the right to continue through college, to attain a career, and to prosper in their life. We must eliminate the inequities in learning that correlate with race and poverty that many students face today as compared with opportunities afforded to more affluent counterparts. And we must create for them qualitative alternatives and equitable alternatives that ensure comparable success of others. Otherwise, we are actually condemning these children, but also deserving our country's democratic principles and compromising social prosperity. That's going to be important for us all. Now, I know that you know that Brown's promise remains unfulfilled. Public as well as private resources supporting education in our country are available to support success and favorable outcomes for children of white and affluent parents, not only for their success as students, but also the likelihood of a graduation from college and a pathway to meaningful career paths so that economic well-being will naturally follow along. Our public school system, the supposed gateway to all the opportunities I described, in reality is only stratified according to wealth, not only stratified according to wealth, but also public education districts across the country remain or are becoming again highly segregated by race and ethnicity. And I know that many things that I'm beginning to talk about were discussed a bit last night, so I'm glad to kind of reinforce what that means in terms of education. Racialized structural barriers leave students of color ill-equipped for college because of the absence in their schools of the kinds of mind-expanding and preparatory work that is expected by many higher education institutions for the students who enter their gates. Statistics tell a story of gross inequality and confirm that even the initial progress that we had made in Brown has now been reversed with the resegregation and poor performances of children of color in urban and rural, northern, southern, and western school districts today. So this is the emerging picture of poverty and imbalance. African Americans, Native Americans, and Latinos are disproportionately more likely to live in poverty, experience sustained under or unemployment, and live at the lowest quartiles of poverty. These groups today actually outnumber whites living in poverty. K through 12 schools are increasingly racially and socioeconomically homogeneous due to economic inequality and residential segregation. 40% of both African American and Latino students now attend high poverty public elementary schools. And those are those in which 3/4 of the students are eligible for a free or reduced price lunch. 5% are white. The schools these children attend are more likely than not staffed by less experienced teachers who often possess emergency teaching credentials, and in schools where per pupil expenditures are low, student-teacher ratios high as compared with wealthy schools, and instructors are less qualified. And reading disparities correlate with wealth. In 4th grade, 82% of children from low-income families are not performing in reading compared to 52% for higher-income students. In 8th grade, 81% of children from low-income families are not performing as compared to 53% whites. Most important, being behind in reading is predictive of failure to graduate from high school. These are terrible statistics, and they tell a terrible story. Faced with such sobering accounts, and then putting them in the context of what we've experienced over the last year, particularly Ferguson and elsewhere, what is revealed is clearly a distrust and democracy in trouble. We must stand up and decry systemic inequality, including that perpetuated by our schools, that has created what I'm calling a crisis. And I would say another manifestation of the new Jim Crow. As I concluded my deanship and moved into my role as chancellor, I was bombarded with evidence of the disparities and the state of which I speak. In the city of Camden, for example, in 2010, only 3 students were considered qualified to attend college based on typical testing criteria. 3 students in the entire city. Students who have stayed in school find it next to impossible to stay on course in the colleges they have attended, at least without extraordinary support. At a law school summit organized this fall by some people you know, Janice Austin and Erwin Chemerinsky at Cal Irvine, we confronted the relatively slow progress in the number of students of color attaining competitive LSAT scores, and thus insubstantial headway in the quest for greater diversity in most law schools. Even as the absolute number of students in many law schools was decreasing, the LSAT still remained and posed real barriers to entry for people of color because of the comparatively lower median scores of poor Blacks and Latinos in particular. And as we all know, to attract a class, many law schools have ratcheted up merit scholarships to capture the smaller numbers of high-scoring whites and the few affluent people of color who are outperforming the norm. Over the last few years, when there were dips in bar passage scores in some law schools, I heard faculty in many law schools, not just ones that I reside in, speculating that the 1 or 2 point differences in median scores of students they were teaching indicated a qualitative diminishment in student capacity to perform. Now, I wonder where they got that speculation. With this kind of entrenched thinking about the value of one test, the effort to dislodge faculty faith in the exam score rather than other indicia of likely performance seems really daunting to me. The efforts to build truly diverse classes appears even more challenging despite our outreach efforts, given the demographical population shifts and the reality of minority, majority, and poor public schools. So at this summit, we explored a number of LSAT score strengthening programs like the undergraduate and law collaborations in New York law schools and undergraduate schools, collective efforts of bar associations and judges in Chicago to provide sustained mentoring and leadership and confidence building pre-law programs like that organized by Gil Holmes and others in Baltimore. Judge Ann Claire Williams presented us with a detailed historical account of successful outreach efforts across the country based on sustained involvement of volunteers working with students over years and tutoring them and teaching them about the profession. Professor Carla Pratt, who many of you know, and others shared their findings built on hundreds of hours of research and inquiry about why these critical and sustained intervention efforts are necessary if we are to successfully shepherd young children to stay on track and succeed. So we developed a list of outreach and mentoring programs that worked, some relying on volunteers and others even drawing on foundation support. But frankly, this exercise was depressing to me because of the amount of energy that we had to put into process just to keep these median scores and to save these students in school. So laudable as these efforts are, they are not grand in scale and impact, I'm afraid. And they do not get to the essential issue of the structural barriers creating and continuing educational disparity and the consequential emotional tolls that inequality project, often leading even the most promising students to drop out before college graduation or attaining that law degree. Data confirm that conditions of poverty and race have dramatically defined the opportunities for college education for students and success in the institutions that enroll them. But now I see evidence of even more striking demographic changes in the candidates and population pools from which law school classrooms will choose, law schools will choose in the near future. This morning someone said, go to a classroom and check it out. And I invite people to do that. Or come to a community college or come to a small regional university like mine and see who is there and what they're doing. Issues of diversity, access, our representation of justice, and in candor, how to define quality and compete for best candidates will be affected by decisions about how higher institutions respond to these demographic shifts and address inequalities in learning opportunities that operate at K through 12 and in some colleges today. Educators in some institutions are seeking to innovate and develop evidence-based responses to the inequities these students experience, even as they reinforce their commitment to liberal education, and I commend that. I believe that universities and colleges must adapt and take more responsibility for addressing inequalities with educational tools adapted for the needs of the very students that they are attending to, and creative solutions aimed at encouraging student success and a love of learning. The task is daunting, but I believe we can do it. Here is some indication of what we are facing. Let's see if I'm in the right place. Yeah. So first of all, only 1/4 of college students today attend four-year college. 1/4 attend four-year colleges. Almost 1/4 of them, of those who attend, have dependent children. Most work at least part-time. Half who never complete college say they dropped out because they need to support themselves and their families. Student hunger is documented by county community colleges and other higher education institutions, and this has led to food banks being placed on college campuses so that students will have enough energy to actually do well. Confronting this reality, the American Association of Colleges and Universities, a national group of colleges and university educators, and a group that's celebrating 100 years in existence. I never knew about them, but I now do. They met in DC last week with a call to action in support of promoting educational equity and excellence in academic offerings for all students. This association issued a report documenting disparities and opportunities for poor and minority students affecting their chances of attaining a degree or otherwise obtaining fruits of learning. And they demonstrated that the chances of success are exceedingly low compared to white and affluent students, and predetermined to a great extent by pre-college, poor preparation, lack of institutional advising, or even access to someone who could offer advice about choices available to them because that person had gone to college. Their success was also crippled by insufficient resources devoted to retention by institutions. So without a dramatic shift of state, federal, and other resources devoted to supporting these students, as well as new institutional attention to treating the developmental issues in terms of learning, we can expect continuing decline in the ability of these students to rise out of their economic circumstances and avoid a pattern of educational neglect. So despite years of efforts to increase economic and racial diversity and overall post-secondary enrollment, educational opportunities in the United States and the economic social benefits that flow from the attainment of a degree remain highly stratified, as I've been saying, and defined by income or race and by the ethnicity of parents, indicative of complex and deeply embedded racial and economic underpinnings. So at the Washington meeting, this organization launched a new report. They called it America's Unmet Promise, the Imperative of Equity in Higher Education. The report documents specific present-day practices and ways of thinking which reinforce inequities, even as educators profess to be supporting democratic ideals of equality of access and opportunity in higher education institutions. And the report argues that traditional experiences in colleges must be restructured to meet their needs. But it also declares that all students should experience high-quality, engaged learning that leads to success at the same rates as white and more affluent students, not only in terms of learning in college, but also in terms of their ability to lead meaningful careers and doing good while doing well in their lives. This equity and access to learning opportunities should extend to all students across types of programs and credentials within the diverse institutional academic tiers that now make up higher education. Thus, community colleges, small research institutions like mine, and flagship institutions should be making available courses that expose all students to liberal education, high-impact problem-solving courses, and courses that teach critical thinking and analysis in the classrooms and in settings tailored to the student's need and background. So this is what we have for tomorrow's college students. By 2027, half of all students graduating from high school will come from communities of color. Majority minority is here. And economic and racial and ethnic disparities increasingly will affect whether and when students will go to college and where, and what they will learn, unless we change that rubric. Higher income minorities and whites are 7 to 8 times more likely to go to selective schools than poor students. The decisions about where minorities and low-income students land are largely defined by pre-college experiences, where they are dramatically less likely to be offered college-focused preparation or enrichment opportunities that are plentiful for affluent schools and in wealthy school districts. The report calls on educators to be conscious of the ways that our practices and policies and unspoken rules place these students' success on their backs, on the very groups that have experienced inequality, rather than on the individuals responsible and able to remedy that wrong. Structural reform in educational institutions require institutional rethinking and innovation, creating new approaches and demonstrating that policies, practices, and norms and values do not operate in a way that perpetuate these existing race and socioeconomic differences. The reporters assert that it is the responsibility of educators to uncover and address this perpetuation, not to condemn the starving patient. The report, very interestingly, calls for an equity imperative that should accompany institutional devotion to ensuring that all students have the benefit of excellence in their education. So it connects this imperative to the promotion of civic engagement and democratic ideals, much the same as what Paulette talked about last night, and the attainment of socioeconomic health for the community. Thus, this work is aimed not only at individual student advancement, but also community and institutional well-being and the stability of our democracy. It's also built on the awareness that college education and obtainment of a degree are critical to economic opportunity. We obtained a heightened understanding of this during and following the Great Recession. Aside from the disturbing fact of a disappearing middle class and sharp income inequality, we now know that college graduates were less likely to lose jobs than high school grads. Unemployment rates of college graduates have now declined, whereas those without college remain stagnant. Well-paying, lower-skilled jobs have all but evaporated, creating further income inequality between college goers and those who do not seek a 4-year degree, but have technical training. Educational excellence, to which the report on equity imperative refers, is innovative and student-centered. Although sensitive to rising student debt, the association data suggests that debt for poor students who graduate is not necessarily insurmountable. Now, this is an interesting proposition. Debt held by affluent students and by graduate professional students, like those in law school, is much higher, tens of thousands of dollars higher. But the comparatively small debt of poor students in college, about $10,000 on average, can push them further into poverty if they do not graduate and reap the benefit of better jobs. Now, there's a public arm to the association that I'm talking about, and those public institutions who are affiliated with the organization are being challenged to cease utilizing merit-based scholarship to attract highly selective students that advance their institutional ranking while leaving these less affluent students unable to afford the tuition at those schools or to become unduly strapped by loans. So we know, I guess many of you do, I know, the temptation about using merit scholarship is very, very pressing. We have pressures for rankings, we have pressures for dollars from donors, we have pressures from faculty and staff, we have lots of people saying that we have to continue to promote rankings and to be aggressive about getting a diverse um, class, but it's always with an interest for how high the median score is going to be or fall. This association calls on states to increase resources to their public institutions and thereby avoid what they call privatizing the cost of tuition through debt assumed by students or their parents or university and college donors. This is critical given the percentage of college goers who are impoverished. All students are more likely to be engaged in learning and find successful career paths if their institutions provide them with opportunities to hone critical thinking skills and experiential learning that engages them in solving unscripted problems like internships and service-oriented courses and co-curricular opportunities can expose students to new ethical issues and issues ripe for public discussion. Their interaction with others, particularly if they come from diverse backgrounds, can lead them to new perspectives and new ideas and insights. We know that engaged learning settings can equip students with broad knowledge and can build analytical skills. I'm speaking to the choir here because we know the value of clinical education and experiential learning. But these organizations are really promoting this at the undergraduate level. Evidence-based studies of learning in higher education document that students' success in college and in the workplace after graduation correlates with their exposure to these kinds of engaged, high-impact learning experiences and critical thinking promoting educational experiences. And it can lead to a lifelong life of inquiry and learning. So the organization offers evidence that student well-being indices, as well as employer satisfaction surveys, also document that the attainment of problem-solving and analytical skills are critical to career path satisfaction and well-being. And I have to say, they even have some evidence documenting that students enjoy a healthier lifestyle, not a get, but a healthier lifestyle if they engage in this kind of learning. These settings exceed the benefits, they say, of studying in defined, concrete fields that we thought would provide the expertise for students or special knowledge, and it exceeds the value of committing people to majors and engaging in more narrow kind of course pursuit. So for years, this organization, the Association of American Colleges and Universities, has been promoting something called LEAP, the Liberal Education and America's Promise Initiative, which requires that membership engage their students in signature work that uses cumulative learning experiences to pursue a significant project that the student herself or himself identifies and defines, and that student work on that project for at least, but at least one semester. The student takes the lead in this and produces work that expresses insights and learning gained from her own inquiry and demonstrates the skills and knowledge she has acquired with faculty supervision and often with mentors who will help them. This one academic commitment is said to be life-changing for first-generation college goers in particular. And with appropriate design and technology and innovative ways of presenting the material, it really does not result in more costly kind of opportunities, but it is focused. So we, again, already know the critical importance of analysis, ethical reflection, and experiential learning. Well, this LEAP approach is focused on those same values. But what's impressive is that the colleges and universities that have committed to this and are doing it really focus on the fact that the equity requires not just access and opportunity, but context and tailoring of the project to fit the students' needs, and a commitment to excellence, as I have said. They argue strongly for all students being exposed to liberal thinking and inculcated with a civically engaged focus that can lead students to trust others and that objective has even larger consequences. Because of the importance they place in this kind of learning, colleges across the country and the spectrum of rigor have adopted these experiential exercises, high impact learning they call them, even as they are continuing to engage in cost-cutting efforts. It requires that in thinking about educational choices and affording excellence for all, we have to ask the equity question. And many of you who've done feminist theory, you know the woman question, right? Or the race question. In what ways do design and reform of educational experiences advance or ignore equity as both a social and learning goal for students? In what ways does a proposed practice affect the learning of students who have experienced marginalization, and does it instill in all students knowledge and values and ideals? So asking this equity question, so to speak, helps to define what is being taught, that is, knowledge and skills needed to contribute to a diverse and globally engaged society and empowering forms of learning. But also, when thinking about teaching practices and alternative approaches, what should we retain or tailor, and how do we make sure that what we decide actually meets the interests of the children, of the students who are involved? More affluent students may also lack the experience of interacting in diverse environments, so the capacity for all students to do this kind of work will further them and make them ready for life. But it's also, I think, a way of instilling more confidence in democratic values. Traditional college experiences will certainly have to be restructured if less affluent students are to thrive while they're in college. This equity imperative requires students coming to all kinds of programs and college tiers to experience excellence in education and thus succeed. So institutions that take seriously the leap undertaken are often small research institutions like mine. Some of you remember Dennis Shields from the University of Michigan in affirmative action cases. He's now the chancellor at another small research institution at the University of Wisconsin-Platteville. And he has, at the summit that we attended this fall, really encouraged people to come to these smaller research institutions. His is a lot larger than mine, but smallish, and seek out students, because those students are often because those institutions are often student-centered and they are access-focused. They are looking either for a minority focus of attention, or as we do, non-traditional, or perhaps first generation, and they really strive to tailor what they do, and they're often nurturers. At Rutgers-Camden, for example, faculty who are researchers really doing path-breaking research are also bringing those students into the labs as undergraduates, and for those of them who are social scientists, going out into the community of Camden to do civic engagement work. They are also typically faculty who mentor and foster students' interest in the development of their critical thinking. So many of these small publics are land grant supported universities in the Midwest, like Dennis Shields. In the Northeast, there's not so many of the land grants, but we still have this civic engagement focus, which is similar, though not the same. Not surprisingly, many of the kinds of institutions to which I refer are also leaders of this Association of Schools and Universities. And for many of them, they are publics with a public mission, a well-defined mission. So then there's the contrast of flagship universities, similar to, I'm going to be candid, Maryland College Park and other places that you all know and love that don't have the same student-centeredness as is being proposed. Some of these are flagship universities, which now have strong competition and status in the more selective university environments. They are very much more committed to the rankings game. They offer substantial merit scholarships. And the irony of this is that they leave to more privately endowed selective institutions the opportunities to get high-performing minorities in particular. And not surprisingly, this association to which I refer has criticized this focus on merit-based support as not fulfilling the public mission of these schools and leaving first-generation and minority students without a place or adequate opportunities to really be pushed. So there is this challenge before us. The data demonstrates that students from families earning less than $30,000 a year comprise 20% of college students and only 13% of students in public research universities. Students from families earning more than $115,000 or more comprise 30%. Students coming from families earning less than $30,000 must provide an average of about $10,000 a year in remaining college costs that are not absorbed by their institutions. And 60% of poor students tend to go to less selective schools. So there are certainly cost concerns associated with the programs that I'm talking about, and that relates to the problem of having these smaller research institutions actually undertake to do this work, while the larger institutions are, as a general proposition, not doing it. But there's good news. There's several new collaborations and alliances that are emerging to address the problem of access and cost. One is called the University Innovation Alliance. Has anybody heard about this? It's 11 huge public research universities. Some of them are Arizona State, Oregon, Georgia State. They say that they are committed to the belief that every American, regardless of socioeconomic background, should have access to an affordable, high-quality college degree. So because of their collaborative focus and massive size, they have the attention of several major foundations. And in part, it's because they have asked for a match of the multi-million-dollar commitments the universities themselves have made to this venture. The universities also tie their interests and commitments to being at the forefront of America's race to regain its competitive edge and increase opportunity and mobility. So they have multiple objectives, but access is one of them. And they aspire to dramatically raise the number of first-generation and non-traditional college students who actually graduate and make lower the rate and raise the rate of success for graduation. They are using modeling to do this, analytics, and they start with small demonstration projects, and then the idea, this is a new association, the idea is that they will build to scale using the money that they've raised and the money from the foundations. They say they're committed to share with each other the data-tested successful interventions and programs in addressing the problem of access and graduation. And then they also say that they will be sharing what they learn to all of us at some point, but that's a lot farther along timeline. They have already developed the predictive analytics to increase semester retention rates and to reduce the time for graduating students. At least at Georgia State, there's some data about it. So taken to scale, this program could result in huge savings. It could promote student success. It could result in dramatic changes in graduation at these universities. Scaled to all 11 universities, there could be really awesome savings and dramatically strong data about graduation that would be useful to all of us. A less ambitious effort, I understand, is being undertaken by some small liberal arts schools that I have not really looked into, but I know we're meeting also at this conference last week. But we all know that historically Black institutions have always had this access-driven approach and have provided avenues for student success that I want to acknowledge and commend. And I actually visited at Howard and was the beneficiary of some wonderful students who were really involved in critical thinking and who were dedicated with a civil rights mission and proud of their history and therefore had the same sort of engaged learning and thirst for knowledge. Universities and colleges' response to the equity imperative and their commitment to educational excellence can be important, I think, for us law school professors and can increase diversity in several ways. Equity retires these schools to be innovative and thoughtful as they develop strategic, successful strategies for increasing for all students that they enroll high quality learning and evidence of demonstrated achievement and degree completion. But it also offers the possibility of increasing the numbers of students who become critical thinkers, hone their analytical and perhaps increase their test-taking skills. More realistically, what I really think comes out of this engaged learning is that a more diverse, prone, and competent cadre of students who embrace learning pathways and who are used to engaging and thinking about values and about justice will emerge, and that could be of benefit to law schools. So my introduction to the work of these groups, including my own civic engagement offerings, and we have immersive programs where students travel for just a couple of weeks out of the country and then engage in problem solving out of the country, which gives them a very different kind of engaged learning experience. And we have interdisciplinary work. All of this has caused me to rethink, quite frankly, some of the strategies that we had been talking about in the last several years in law schools as well as in universities more generally about shortening opportunities to learn and focusing on skills training only or in the main and having specialization tracks because of debt concerns and because of workforce objectives. I actually fear that some of these programs will reestablish the hierarchies of learning that I'm talking about is so disturbing as it is, and will continue the legacy of educational inequality. So access-focused institutions with track records for student retention and success who are trying to collaborate and engage in experiential learning is what I really would like to join with. Some of them have gotten the attention of the Department of Education and the White House. We were recognized by the President and Mrs. Obama in DC because we have this civic engagement focus and have Carnegie designated an opportunity for students to engage, and because of our coalition work for with other higher education institutions in the city of Camden. So I'm hopeful that more foundations and public support and recognition will result in more money for these kinds of offerings. And I'm also hopeful that states will see the benefits of them and will encourage collaboration, even among law schools, and the development of the evidence-based equity models, and provide funding so that the institutions can find the means to do evidence-based work, because I think that's going to be critical going forward. We have to prove that what we do is good. It has been invigorating for me to see students transformed by the high-impact work that we do at Camden, but I'm also really excited about the collaborative opportunities of working with other higher education institutions and foundations, of course, and the Department of Education to build on these civic engagement commitments, because I believe that they really will have the opportunity to create new paths of learning for our students that will lead them more quickly into the professional pathways and training and careers that we all want people to have. So I welcome your thoughts about the future of these efforts and also the future possibility of increased collaboration among law schools and in connection with undergraduate and other university parts. So thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer questions. Yep.
Thank you so much, Chancellor, for your talk. I had a question related to what seems to be a trend now in regards to massive open online courses, right? So access to education is a theory by everyone who can connect. And I would love to hear your thoughts on that in terms of providing access and also how that would work into translating into degrees and getting degrees.
Yes, so I think that this is a movement that the train has left the station. I'm not so sure it's going to be as profoundly embraced as some people hype, but I do think that something like it is something that we all have to embrace to a greater extent. And Georgia State and others in this alliance do use online. Actually, there was an anecdote about one of the for-profit groups engaged in online learning, not MOOCs necessarily, but apparently the survey that I was talking about, student well-being and the like, this group got really high marks by students and alums for the good feeling that they had in this online training. But the reason why, apparently, is that they were able to identify the fact that, as I said, you know, having a mentor, having someone to be involved in your life, having somebody to ask questions. So they just assigned to everybody an online mentor. They never saw the people. They didn't interact in the way that we think, or at least I think, you know, this kind of approach should take. But the students got a great deal out of it, and they felt, for lack of a better word, loved and nurtured. So they got higher marks than some of the research institutions that I'm probably disparaging at this point that don't necessarily think about that. So I'm open to anything and everything that can work, honestly.
Thank you very much. This is very timely for me and my university. I'm at the University of Arkansas, Little Rock, and we started last summer at the impetus of our new dean, Dean Michael Schwartz, a program that's based on the POSSE program. And I wondered if you could talk about POSSE and that impact. And our program, we searched for LEAP, and we didn't see LEAP anywhere, so our program is called Legal Education Advancement Project.
That's funny.
So now I have to go back and say, I think
that's really funny.
Yeah. So could you talk a little bit about POSSE, and then, because we're using
everybody
that
knows
model.
POSSE, right? Does everybody know what that is?
Yeah.
Now I can't remember where it was started.
I can't remember the
but
university.
It's foundation supported, and many selective liberal arts colleges have POSSEs. Basically what they do, it's based on the notion of critical mass. So basically they have a critical mass of people of color and then a support system for that critical mass. You should probably tell them more. I mean, is that enough to...
With you is that it was founded by a woman. I think she was a faculty member. I don't think she was in administration, but she saw a group of black students, I think, at her university one year, and then she hadn't seen them for a while. It was a small group, and she saw one somewhere out and said, well, what happened to you? And he said, well, if I'd had my POSSE with me, I would have been in school. And so what it created was this sense of making sure your point, a critical mass, but and they come to
but then there is instilled
they
a
have
support
a faculty
system
advisor,
that
which
uses
is what
that.
we're mimicking.
Yes.
And I happened to meet the group from Kalamazoo because I was with a friend of mine who was at Kalamazoo College. And so they come as a group from, like, this group came from somewhere in California.
Yes.
They come to, like, Kalamazoo.
Yes.
They're in different programs,
Yes.
but they have a faculty advisor.
Yes.
They meet regularly.
Yes.
And one of the things that reminded me of what you were saying about the mentor program on the internet, or is that they say the biggest thing is knowing they have a group and an advisor that
Right.
always has their back. It wasn't
That's
even
right.
as much about academics.
Yes. Yes. So the way I know it is at Bryn Mawr.
Okay.
Bryn Mawr College had a posse, and they are successful.
Mm-hmm.
No question. They are expensive. And they're similar to what I was saying earlier. Successful programs that it's hard to scale up for. And so everybody should have a posse, honestly. You know, I'd love a posse. I know, as I was working on this, I think of my own daughter, who is at a school that shall go nameless, about to get a law degree. And she needs a posse. So we all need posses, especially during these times, to kind of go back and have a sanity check and feel the love. But it's very expensive to establish that and keep it going.
We're doing, I don't want to take it, but we're doing it at Bowen, and we're trying to keep costs down. We're seeking a grant from a group. We're a couple
Yes.
places, but a
Grants.
grant
Yeah.
to support it. The important thing for me is it does provide that network, and we only
That's
have 5
exactly right.
students now
Yeah.
in the first year. Example, student was we were just talking, I'm the faculty advisor. I saw one of the students who was a black woman, and she just seemed so tight.
Yeah.
And I finally said, well, what's wrong? What's going on? Oh, nothing. What's going on? And then she just burst into tears because she said, I don't get property.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, honey, don't join the crowd.
Really.
You know?
That's all you need. It's a sanity
but
check.
she
Yeah.
needed the,
You
and
need
then
it.
her, the 4 others
Yes.
there just kind of converged and
Yes.
said, I'm having the same problem, but this is what I'm doing. And this
Yeah.
is,
Yeah.
and that's the beauty of it.
Yes. But you said 5.
It's 5.
And
It's
I'm
one
saying
that's
that-
expanded to 14.
Yes. Okay. So the alliance that I'm talking about is scale. And they say the commitment is to graduate 30,000 more students in the next 5 years. 30,000. Not baseline. This is above what they have ordinarily done. And so they're doing it in scale. And I'm not suggesting that that's the only way to do it. Any way we can do it is fine. What has been so hard for me is to see, and we did it at the summit, to see all of these wonderful things, but it's just so small and incremental, a response to this massive problem.
Hi there. Thanks for the presentation. Taken by a lot of what you're talking about, including with Posse, is the expense of these programs. And that strikes me as one of the biggest issues with scaling them. And so are there any programs that have been successful and inexpensive?
So the volunteer ones are, they are, and they're very successful. And I mentioned, I'm blanking on her last name, Anne, did you hear me? Anne Claire, she's a 7th Circuit judge. Williams, thank you. Judge Williams has actually put together a list of highly successful ventures. These are not scale in the sense of each year, but they are scale in the sense that they have lasted for umpteen years and now have a body of people who continue to give back. So I'm happy to send it to you if you send me an email, or you can email probably Judge Williams and she can send it to you. But she's done a wonderful job bringing all of those together. I have to say again, listening to this, I was in awe at the kind of work that these people were prepared to do for years and years just to keep things going.
Maybe one more question? No?
Well, thank you. Now I have one more task, however, which is a wonderful task. I get to announce, is it time?
Yes.
Okay. I get to announce the 2015 MAPOC Faculty Awards. The Franklin D. Cleckley Award, are we ready? Goes to Suzette Malveaux. So I have a little bit about her. Professor Suzette Malveaux, wonderful person, is receiving this award for her many years of service to the legal profession as a litigator, a teacher, and a scholar, and through her community and civic engagement. From her years representing women, Native Americans, African Americans, farmers, and others in employment discrimination and other civil rights cases, through her teaching civil procedure, complex litigation, employment discrimination, and civil rights at the University of Alabama School of Law and the Columbus School of Law at Catholic University, her scholarly focus on the issues and barriers in enforcing the employment discrimination laws, and her serving as an advisor to the Legal Defense Fund and a spokesperson at national conferences and various other media outlets, Professor Malveaux embodies the transformative and progressive values that the Franklin Cleckley Awards seeks to recognize. And I am particularly thrilled also to be able to tell you the awardee of the Banks Haddon Junior Faculty Award, and that goes to Professor Margaret Hu. Professor Margaret Hu is in her second year at Washington and Lee School of Law. However, during the past 5 years, continuing her fellowships, she has produced an impressive body of work, including 2 published articles in the Indiana Law Journal and the UC Davis Law Review, respectively, and a forthcoming work in the Pepperdine Law Review. She has made more than 50 presentations, including 10 talk show interviews, and the topic of all of this scholarship and presentations has been issues of concern to vulnerable populations in the subjects of immigration and cyber surveillance. She teaches a range of courses: constitutional law, administrative law, cyber surveillance law and policy, and immigration law, through which her scholarship flows and augments. Finally, she has already organized at least 2 conferences and ensures that faculty of color are well represented on the panel of those conferences. So let's congratulate both of them for their awards. And thanks again.
Well, before we break up, I want to, first of all, thank you again for your wonderful remarks. It's so important for us to focus, in part, as we think of new challenges, to think about the new challenges literally where we live in higher education, and how we can eradicate some of those lines that we're spending the weekend worried about. And to also acknowledge that the Banks Haddon Award is named after our distinguished speaker for her many years of contributions, as Reggie pointed out, to MAPOC, to the places where she has led and is leading, and to higher education generally. So we want to acknowledge that the award is named in part after you.
Thank you. And a wonderful colleague. Tanya Lavelle Banks.
And so, in honor of all this, and on behalf of MAPOC and the West Virginia University College of Law, we want to give you this little token.
Thank you, thank you. Thanks, everybody.
I'm going to take personal privilege to say in my very first law review article, I thank Chancellor Haddon. It was a Saturday afternoon, and she was faxing me corrections and edits and comments, on the eve of sending it to the journal. So I thank you personally. So we are at 2:06 according to this clock on the computer. Looks like we can roll into our next panel, which will be back in the Lugar courtroom where we were. So stretch, say hi to your neighbors, finish your coffee, and let's get back to Luger in the next 10 minutes. Thanks.